Hello, Silas here, and I'm back with my friend Steven. You can say what's up to the peoples.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well.
And we're back for another one of our conversation series. This is one where we're discussing a book, and it's Marry Him. The case was settling for Mr. Right.
Good enough,
Mr.
Mr.
Good
Good
Enough.
enough. Yeah, almost. You got it.
Should
Yeah.
have the name up, but yeah, okay, getting to that now. So, Stephen, tell us a bit about this book and kind of just why we're doing this series.
So I'm not going to go through a full-fledged introduction I have in the last few times. I'm assuming if you're listening to this part by now, this is part 5 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably have an idea. Basically, it's an exercise in re-examining priorities when it comes to dating and marriage. It's based on a woman's personal odyssey, but also it draws from experts in psychology, sociology, matchmaking, etc.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read what it says here on the Amazon page. And as Stephen said, this is part 5. So we've normally when we do these book series where Steven reads a book or I read a book or we read something and it's like multiple ones, in the initial ones we have a big intro where we kind of talk about the stuff. And both of us were single when we started doing that. Steven himself is happily in a relationship now, not settling for Mr. Good Enough, found somebody that really fits him in a good way, and I think she thinks he fits her in a good way.
Mhm.
And for myself, I haven't been attempting because I just don't think I am in a situation to even get a good enough. I'm just out of the game itself. But these observations are kind of things that are relatively interesting to us from having seen this more from like a male's point of view. So it's like a manversation of sorts. But we've heard men talking about the dating game in the United States of America in certain ways. And now this is hearing it from a woman who's has been pointing out certain things. I don't know, how did you find this book to begin with, Stephen? Because
So I was listening to, I think it was the show The Roommates, and she was one of the guests on. And I liked a lot of the stuff that she was saying. And obviously, the book is geared towards women, but I liked the things that she was saying more generally. So I thought, why don't I give the book a shot? Because I wanted to see what insights she had, especially from a woman's perspective, but also wonder, does any of this apply to men? Could any of this apply to me? And are there? I definitely thought, okay, there are things to learn here. And as I say, it's very well documented and well researched. I mean, she interviews matchmakers, marriage experts, all these other people. So part of it's her own experience, but part of it she's also gone to people who've studied this in depth and know what they're talking about.
yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, X is X, but it's also good to see things from different points of view because X, Y, and X, X is not exactly the same. And she borrows from some of her personal insights and this is one of the type of typical things that I kind of noticed since back in the day. Like people used to read like Men's Health, like Maxim, and things like that. And there's all this dating information about what women want from just men writing the books. And then in the other aspect, the women are reading Cosmo and Glamour. And it's like all about what men want, but from women writing it. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't study what somebody else wants and things like that. But I think current day, current year, current timeline is a big disconnect between what men think women want and what women think men want because people are trying out and there's more flexibility, there's more choice in this thing, whereas in the past it was more regimented where even your wants weren't necessarily that much. It was like you need to find somebody who can earn as much as you can, live in this area, has a job, can have kids. It was just that was it, and
Yeah.
the other stuff was extra. But now it's like, what do I want from that person who can do those things? And for some people, those things aren't even part of it. But I think a key part for this book is it is focusing on people who want somebody, I think, also to start a family with in a typical monogamous sort of relationship, so pair bonded that kind of way. If you want all those other kinds of different relationships that are possible to have, I don't think this is necessarily focused on you. And as Stephen said, it's mostly on women.
Sure.
So yeah, it says here an eye-opening, funny, painful, and always truthful, in-depth examination of modern relationships and a wake-up call for single women about getting real about Mr. Right. You have a fulfilling job, great friends, and a perfect apartment. So what if you haven't found the one just yet? He'll come along someday, right? But what if he doesn't? Or what if Mr. Right has been, well, Mr. Right in front of you, but you passed him by? Nearing 40 and still single, journalist Lori Gottlieb started to wonder, what makes for lasting romantic fulfillment, and are we looking for those qualities when we are dating? Are we too picky about trivial things that don't matter and not picky enough about the often overlooked things that do? In Marry Him, Gottlieb explores an all too common dilemma: how to reconcile the desire for a happy marriage with a list of must-haves and deal breakers so long and complicated that many great guys get misguidedly eliminated. On a quest to find the answers, Gottlieb sets out on her own journey in search of love, discovering wisdom and surprising insights from sociologists and neurobiologists Marshall, I keep saying Marshall, it's like fighting. Wow. Marital researchers and behavior economists, as well as single and married men and women of all generations. So that's what they say here. And I think a key part here is an observation was made. There's a difference between being involuntarily single and involuntarily celibate. With men, they're mostly incels, where a man wants to have relations, physical sexual relations with certain women that he finds desirable that don't find him desirable. So they normally have the control on who they actually have intercourse with. But I think with women, there's an involuntary single type of situation where the average woman can find somebody to have intercourse with them that is fitting enough towards what they consider physically attractive for that. But getting that person to dedicate themselves to you and no longer be single, I think that is something that you see with involuntarily single. And I think so. Here, when they talk about the eliminated, misguided, eliminated, I think that's more on the women just saying like, okay, guys are asking me out, but this is not somebody I'll say yes to. I think that's also a key thing to keep in mind here. Where in the West, if you're listening to this, chances are the women are still the ones who are being proposed to, and then the men are the ones who are more in the active aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
not a whole lot else to say. I figured we could jump in because I mean, yeah, it's most of
Yeah.
the stuff we've said already.
So we'll jump into chapter 5, and Stephen's going to tell us the name of the chapter, and he just kind of reads some excerpts from it, and then we do a discussion, then we kind of just go back through the whole thing in that way. So tell us the name of this chapter.
Sure. So this is actually the beginning of part 2 of the book. The part 2 itself is called From Fantasy to Reality. It starts here with a quote by Sigmund Freud, which I'm going to read. Illusions commend themselves to us because they save us pain and allow us to enjoy pleasure instead. We must therefore accept it without complaint when they sometimes collide with a bit of reality against which they are dashed to pieces. I think that's really good, and I think that's a theme that's consistent with this book.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's something that has definitely come up often, where both men and women, we have the illusion that we have way more options than we actually do, or too much to choose from, when realistically it's not really. Most of them are not really actual options.
well, it's also that we may bring more to the table than we think as well. You know, that's the other thing.
True.
Yeah.
That's another good way of looking at it as well. That
Like
is true of us.
I'm great. I should have these type of men or women because I'm great. But then it's like, in reality, do they see it the same way? Yeah.
Yeah. Or yeah. And as you said, the inverse is you're thinking like I'm not good enough for this person, so there's no way this person really is interested in me, and you kind of shut them off. Whereas that person might be somebody who you could fit with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So chapter 5 is called Older and Wanting to be Wiser. So we'll jump right in here. Rachel Greenwald is what you might call a sensible optimist. She wants people to find love; it's her passion. But if she can sound absurdly hardcore, is like in her first best-selling book, it's called "Find a Husband After 35," using what I learned at Harvard Business School. Except for something illegal or immoral, would you do anything to find a husband? It's only because she knows the reality. The dating world changes once you're out of your 20s. So, um, a few years ago, the Newsweek article reported that their article from the 1980s had been wrong. It wasn't true that women over 40 had a better chance of being killed by a terrorist than getting married. Instead, their chance for marriage was as high as 40%. So this was supposed to be reassuring, but think about it. Less than half of women over 40 will ever marry. Besides, some of these women won't get married in time to have children, and they're likely to marry someone who's divorced with kids and has the difficulties of another family to deal with. Um, Greenwald told Gottlieb that you have to remember you're not dating in a vacuum. You might be great, but there's so many great women out there, just like at the same time, there are fewer available men. There's a reverse power curve you have to take into account as you get older. She cited a census figure in her book: 28 million single women over 35 versus 18 million men. When I looked deeper into the census figures for 30 to 44 years, I found there were 107 single men for every 100 single women, but for 45 to 65, there were around 72 single men for every 100 women. If those numbers sound daunting enough, she said that out in the world, there are even fewer prospects for women my age. Why? Because many men want to and can marry younger women, and because men big on commitment, starting a family, usually aren't the ones who are still available after 35. So women in their mid-30s will end up dating guys with more complicated pasts and more issues, just like they'll have by then. I could take two fantastic women at age 25, Greenwald said. These women are exactly the same in terms of appeal. Now put them through different experiences over the next 10 years. One gets married and one stays single, then line them up side by side at 35, and you got two totally different women. The one had a happy 10-year-old marriage, thinks the world is good. Women who and the woman who was out in the singles world for 10 years is cynical and pessimistic, and that's what it's like for men too. By the time you put one guy through a successful marriage and another through the mill of dating and failed relationships, they're two different kinds of guys. That's what's different about dating older people. They tend to be more jaded. They're not as hopeful and appealing as young single people tend to be. So she's, Lori says she didn't consider these factors when she was 10 years younger and waiting for the right guy to pop up. It seemed like it seemed reasonable to think that the longer she searched, the better guy she'd end up with, but it's faulty logic. And then it's highlighted here: the longer you wait, the less likely you are to find someone better than you've already met. Okay, that's thoughts and comments. Yeah.
Yeah, first, this is something about statistics and how little information, accurate information about the state of reality we've had the ability to even acquire. Because, like, that stat of higher chance of getting killed by terrorists versus getting married, that's too absurd. It's
Yeah.
just to us now hearing that, it's just on the face so absurd.
Yeah.
But back then, maybe people just had such little knowledge about terrorism. It was just completely getting hit by lightning is higher chance than I'd say maybe like you probably have
I
a
think
higher chance
so.
of
Yeah.
getting hit by lightning than dying, but from a terrorist
Because
attack.
I think, what is it, like
Especially in the West.
15 people, I think, in the U.S. die from lightning strikes a year. So then you would have to add up like all the terrorist attacks and like divide it by years and everything, and it wouldn't add up to,
Yeah,
because you could say,
yeah,
I mean, obviously 3,000 people got killed in 9/11, but then you have to add up, I'm not trying to minimize the lives lost, but I'm making the point that 3,000 out of a nation of 330 million, and then that was over 20 years ago. So if you spread that out over 20 years, it's like,
yeah.
yeah.
We're not mathematicians here, nor
Yeah.
biologists. But so those kind of stats are kind of there. But then that just brings up the fears and things like that. Then, of course, there's some cultural ones, and this is not just something in the West. Like other cultures, like the leftover women they have in like Japan, where it's like by 25, it's like you're completely old and like done. Like
Yeah.
they give you like fruitcake over like Christmas. There's some vicious ass people out there. So there's things like that. But then also, now one thing that we had a separate one, we're going to post it sometime. It's probably going to be posted by the time you hear this, where we were reading about a book, a Daily Mail story about where have all the good men gone. And that came up also again, that whole situation of there being fewer men, single men, than single women, which does not necessarily make. Are we wondering how it makes sense? Because you're talking about the ages of 40 to, if it's below 50, then that's below the 5 year age difference, whereas like men normally die like at 65 on average, and then women are like 70. So it's kind of below that. But maybe some of those men, yeah, it could actually be a situation where a lot of those men are also dying at 30, where it's like if you get past 30, so men are dying. And then when they say single, I want to kind of understand what those statistics were, because is it people who are on dating sites, people who are actively looking? Because like you look at the unemployment numbers, people are like, oh, unemployment is at 4.5%, but then like 10% of the population has stopped looking for jobs. So they don't count those people into the unemployment figure. So with these figures, is it like more women are actually actively looking, or is it just literally more men, more single men or single women alive because they just happen to live longer? That's something I haven't really seen somewhere that actually shows how those statistics are being taken. Because in that article, it was saying 7 to 1, right? It was saying for every one single man, there's 7 women. I'm like, what? Maybe they were talking about the entire age span. I don't know what they could be talking about, because I think they were
Well,
saying to
it
55. I'm like,
it was for singles 30 to 44. For every 107 single men, there were 100 single women. So there were fewer single women. But then when it gets up to 45 to 65, it's 72 single men for every 100 single women.
yeah, what
Yeah.
what is that? Is it people dying?
Well, no. But I think, I think in general, I think it's like what she's trying to get at is that whole thing about like it's acceptable for men to marry older. So as you go higher and higher up in term with men in terms of
Okay, so
age,
they're marrying
more.
younger women.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
so it's like they're continuing to get married. So as you go up the ladder, there's fewer and fewer single men. But
Ah,
then
okay.
the other challenge, as she says, is that they're also marrying younger women. So you can have a 55-year-old single guy, but if he still wants a
I see.
family, he's going for a younger woman. He's not dating a woman his age, unless he
Okay.
already like they say, unless he already has a family or he's divorced or widowed and he's just looking for a companion. But then it's like there's going to be fewer of those guys too. Yeah,
Okay, that
yeah,
makes sense because
yeah,
like with men, they still have a wider range
yeah.
of people to possibly get married to. But then why would it be at the younger age? Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So at the younger age, it's still those fewer men have found somebody yet, but those women are still lower. It's still at 100 compared to 107 because some of those 100, those seven that could have matched up with those people under 40 might be married to some of the people who are above 40. So they're being taken out by that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, that makes sense. That makes sense then. Okay, then I completely understand those stats now. But then also death. Death is also a part of it. That's in there. Yeah, and what was the last line you said? I think I'm forgetting. I was going to say something based off
The
of that.
longer you wait, the less likely you are to find someone better than you've already met.
Yeah, that's something that I was kind of concerned about. I was concerned about this in my 20s. I was like, if I'm going to actually meet someone, and on my background, I've traveled around a lot where I moved from a different place, and like all the friends and people that I know, I have to like reset again the locations. And I'm kind of just wondering, like, how long does it take to actually get to know somebody enough to be comfortable enough to actually discuss with them? But I'm thinking that's also on the person. And this is a key thing that was said. Yes, there's thousands of people out there, but there's only one you. If you are solidly yourself, you can meet somebody and get to know them deeper and in a more substantial way in a few days than you would know like talking to certain people for 1,000 days if it's not talking about substantial things, if you're not truly speaking to who you are. So I used to think like, okay, I have to marry somebody that I already knew at the time when I was in my 20s. Like I couldn't imagine like meeting a brand new person and getting to know them. But I'm thinking who I was in my 20s. I don't know if that's necessarily the same person I would be today. I don't know. So I'm not quite sure about that. And all of y'all out there, let us know if you're all listening to this, guys, gals, or anything else in between. If you were with somebody and you're older, how when was that somebody you knew from before? I'd be very interested in finding that out. Is that somebody you knew before, or is that somebody you met when you feel a you became who you are today, or are you still that person? That'd be something I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I mean the book will sort of get into some of the things you're touching on, so I'm just going to keep
Okay,
reading. All right.
cool.
So this is called the checklist of a 25-year-old. It's not that available older men are quote unquote losers, as many dating women might complain. It's just they don't look like the person you imagined being with since you were a teenager. If you had met this person when he was 27, you would have known him when he was much closer to your mental image of the man you thought you'd marry. But at 45, even if he looks middle aged and has an ex-wife and kids and has experienced disappointment, he can still be a great spouse. The key Greenwald said is to realize that realistic isn't a dirty word. The goal is to marry someone you truly love who is going to make you treat you well and make you happy. But nothing I just said has anything to do with a guy's age, what his hairline is, all the things on the checklist of a 25-year-old. If you're 40 years old and you restrict your mental image of Mr. Right, you're going to be disappointed. She said, for a lot of women, the search criteria goes like this: I'm 40 and I want to have a baby, and I'm only interested in someone 5'10" and above, and under 45 because I'm really active and I look young. I'm Jewish, so he has to be Jewish. I'd prefer someone who has no kids, but if he has kids, I prefer they're older, don't live with him, and they go on and on. I was glad Greenwald and I were on the phone because I could feel my cheeks turn red. Jita says guilty as charged. I mean, what's wrong with wanting those things? Would she tell an older single guy, hey, you know, all those women you weren't attracted to or interested back in your 20s? Well, guess what? They're available and some are divorced and you should be more open minded. She's saying, not at all. I'm not saying you should end up with an ugly, boring guy, but some women search so narrowly they can't even find a guy to go on a date with. I'm not at all saying I want women to settle. You definitely have to have real chemistry with someone, but how can you tell if you have chemistry if you won't even give a guy a chance if he's the wrong age or height? Maybe he's so compassionate and hilarious and has other qualities that don't meet the eye. A big problem Greenwald explained is that we have the same standards at 35 we did at 25, but the things we wanted at 25 aren't as important to our lives as they are at 35. We should be looking at things like patience and stability instead of instant butterflies. In fact, we should be looking at in fact, we should be looking for that at 25 so we don't marry the guy at 25 and realize at 35 he doesn't have qualities that are essential in a good marriage. I'd give the same advice to a 25-year-old that I'm giving you, but the 25-year-olds don't want to listen. Okay, thoughts and comments? Yeah.
Yeah, and This is again just a good thing to remind that settle is not necessarily a negative term. I know for some people, when you've been taught on that whole Disney princess vibe, where you find this and you have this like huge romantic type of thing, or just even books, rom coms, or action. People are like, I'm going to be this action star and save this damsel type of thing for the men's aspect of it. But life itself isn't like this. It's not some kind of storybook and fairy tale. You're not the main character or some story where there's going to be an arc and things like that. Some things just happen, and having something that's settled is not necessarily bad. Think about sometimes there'd be some strife and something. If somebody has some issues and you come to a settlement in some kind of judicial case, do people necessarily consider that to be negative things? Like, no, you settled the issue. The issue is actually settled. Like having something that has settled down, if something is chaotic and even in your personal life, there's a lot of chaos going on and things settle down. You don't get home like, ah, damn it, like all that chaos going on in life, like things at work are not hectic anymore. Things have settled down. People are not upset when they hear about something like that. But when it comes to relationships, there's this negative connotation for some people when it comes to settle. So I don't think I think that's good to remind us here, and it's also good here they're talking about. Okay, some people it's a spouse. If you're already older, and this is something that I was saying with that article that we read. If you're already older, you have kids, why are you also being like, oh, where are all the good single men without kids and things? I mean, if you have kids, why don't you do like that step by step show and also go find people with kids as well?
Yeah.
Because they might actually have a similar point of view or a similar understanding in the background. You might have similar levels of prioritizing where somebody might realize, like, yes, I really love my kids and I still care for this person. But if somebody has that in their life as well, they might have lesser of a chance of misconstruing your amount of care for them, even though your kids are ahead of it, or having the concerns of some spouse or some ex or somebody else who's outside who might have some influence. I think that kind of environment. So that's just having somebody who's, if you have XYZ, also be open to somebody that has those similar things. Doesn't mean that they have to have those things, especially if you consider those things positive. Because for some people, they don't hate their kids. They think my kids are positive. So why are those same people who think their kids are positive will also look at somebody with kids and say that's a negative? There's a few people like that who are just kind of odd to me.
And like I always say, what is settling? I mean, it's like if you were this great, if you see yourself, you're walking around saying I'm a 10, I'm a great catch, people are lucky to have me. Well, are you getting those kinds of outcomes? If you're a woman and you're saying I'm a 10, I'm a dime, whatever, it's like a guy would have snatched you up a while back. If you're going for guys that aren't interested in you, the guys who are interested in you aren't good enough, obviously there's some sort of mismatch here, and it's either you have things you have to change or you're just overestimating your own value. And then again, and my response is always, if I'm being harsh, well, are you getting those kinds of outcomes? Like if you have a bachelor's degree, a little bit of work experience, and you're getting paid 50K a year, you're not settling. You're getting what you're capable of getting given your credentials and experience. If you want the higher income, you have to make the case as to why someone should pay you that, because that's coming at their expense, and what are you bringing in return? But for a lot of people, it's like they don't do that calculation, but also they get offended when I even suggest it. It's like, well, you want something for nothing, essentially. That's the problem. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Move to the next section.
Yep. The section's called Selflessness and Humility. So the advice Greenwald gives is knock off anything as a deal breaker that's objective, like age, height, where he went to college, what type of job he has, how much hair he has, whether he has kids or an ex-wife, and focus on what's subjective, like maturity, kindness, sense of humor, sensitivity, ability to commit. And she, like Gottlieb, basically says, well, it's easy for you to say you got married 17 years ago when you were 28. How would you feel now if you were single in your 40s and someone told you not to pay attention? And she laughed at this because she had been there. She had said that she almost didn't meet her husband because she was too hung up on these things. Back in business school, she spoke to her husband on the phone, enjoyed the conversations, but she looked at his photo and wasn't impressed. So she ruled him out as a romantic process. But then at prospect, but then she met him in person, got to know him better, found him cute and more. And she's like, when I was single and looking, I wanted everything. I wanted tall, good looking, smart, funny. I was so specific. I even wanted curly hair. And while she got some, but not all of what she wanted, she's quick to point out that none of that has to do with the happiness in her marriage. When she was dating, two qualities that never occurred to me are as important that turned out to be critical in their marriage are selflessness and humility. A ton of times on a daily basis in marriage, you have to decide whether to maximize your happiness or the other person's happiness. And my husband has proved so often to maximize my happiness. In courtship, we mistake romance for selflessness, but it's not at all the same thing. Romantic gestures like sending flowers aren't the same as waking up in the middle of the night and taking care of the baby so the other spouse can sleep. Also, humility is the key, the ability to say it doesn't really matter who's right or wrong, and it's okay to have different opinions about things. So I ask people, where on your list do you rank selflessness, whether you're rejecting a guy based on his age and height? In fact, John Gottman, a well-known marriage researcher at the University of Washington and author of the bestseller The Seven Principles of Making Marriage Work, has shown that he can predict marriage with success with a 91% accuracy by looking at basic qualities like compromise, tolerance, and communication style. Greenwald isn't discounting the desires, but she's saying while we like everything in a guy, we should re-examine our standards and early on if we want to find the right partner before, especially if we want to find the right partner before it becomes increasingly harder. When she meets women over 35 and takes their romantic histories, it's some variation on I was in this failed relationship for 3 years, another for 5 years, or I kept getting back with my ex-boyfriend instead of making myself available to meet someone more appropriate, or I knew after 6 months or a year it wasn't going anywhere, but I stayed anyway, hoping things would change. What should have changed was the way that these women pick their partners. So according to Greenwald, they squandered their peak dating years. The men they've been attracted to have generally offered the exact opposite of what they wanted in the long run: stability, responsibility, compassion, groundedness, maturity, the desire for kids. You have to remember that you don't have time to waste on a guy just because you're infatuated with him. So Gottlieb says, oh, guilty as charged again. She thought about a boyfriend who fawned over her all the time, but then would suddenly withdraw and become distant. She stayed with him for 2.5 years anyway. And there were a couple of wonderfully exciting and romantic guys who turned out to be more in love with themselves than me. Um, when she was younger, she kept thinking that she could let things unfold organically and not bother initiating conversations about futures. But she said it's just as important to be proactive early on before you get into real crunch time. Women want to get married and have families, need to think about what really matters and make their dating choices consistent with their words before they end up single in their mid 30s. I'm not trying to be an alarmist. It's just a shame to see people coming to me with these realizations when it's so much harder than it might have been if they had a different perspective 10 years earlier. Um, Say you're 33 and you've been dating for 11 years since college, you want to start a family. Well, I can set you up with a great 40-year-old who wants to start a family, but at 35, it's more of a challenge. A half shelf life for a woman is about 35. That's when geriatric pregnancy starts. And I think about 90% of a woman's eggs are dead by that point. Um, the real shelf life is 40. Once you're 40 and dating online, no guy who wants to have kids is willing to even consider you. Divorced guys who have already had kids will meet a 40-year-old, but many of them have had vasectomies. So Greenwald had told me this when I was 30. I would have thought she was exaggerating, or at very least, I would have been the exception. Even now, I thought I'm cute, I'm young at heart, I don't look my age, but everything she was telling me turned out to be true. Of course, all my friends single or married. Few knew any single guys my age at all, and of course, the ones that they did know, neither was willing to date a woman over 40. So I had a choice. I could either rail at the plight of single women, a single female looking for love, or I could use the information to my advantage. But there was some good news. I had a chance to get a fresh start and get it right this time by dating guys with qualities that might make me happy in the long run. The long run seemed to be Greenwald's focus. Over the past decade, she had a hand in several hundred marriages. While many of these women initially resisted casting a wider net and focusing on subjective criteria, none of their marriages, to her knowledge, ended in divorce. Maybe she was on to something. Okay, you go ahead. That's the end of that section.
Yeah, some stuff here.
Yeah.
I think it's a good reminder there also with the whole objective versus subjective thing. I think we also do a series of Dishing on Dish where we just talk about food and things like that. And we both cook. We're both also interested in that. Steven's been working in the food service industry. And I think here it's something where you can look at it as the content versus the presentation, like the content of the food, the ingredients, the actual quality of the things that are in there versus the plating. Like the plating is an extra, it's an extra added thing. But if the food is crap, even if it's plated in the most amazing way possible, served in the best restaurant with the best ambiance, the food is still going to be crap.
Yeah.
But then if you have good food, if you have good content actually in there, it doesn't matter if you're blind or if it's just the music is loud. You'll
Yeah.
go to a place that's not as posh because like the food is great.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's good to think of there. What is the actual main oath of the
Yeah.
thing that you're actually getting there versus just saying, oh, this person looks good? Because in my experience and most people that I talk to, there's some people whose personality will endear you to you'll get used to this body is what that personality is. Oh, that laugh might not have been that good to me, but that laugh comes after this personality makes this joke. It's just really cool. Or
Yeah.
this person did this, and then when they do have this little tick, they do it because they did this amazing thing, and you start appreciating those things.
Mm.
But I've never really seen people who are just like gorgeous, and then they make you ignore how angry they are, or how dumb they are, how just uncaring they are. And another thing with the looks is that's something that is a depreciating quality. So if you're using the physicality, the visual aspect of it, that is something that's going to get less and less and less as the person
Yeah.
gets older. Whereas the personality and those other positive things tend to become more intense and there's more facets to that. So I think
Yeah.
that's a key thing to look at.
And just to add to that point, that's my one criticism of that one female friend, where she's always like, "Oh, I want a romantic relationship, I want a one-time thing," but then, "Oh, I'm picky with looks. What do you like about this guy? He's hot." And it's like, well, how are you hoping to build a connection off of your physical attraction to someone? Like, there are a lot of women that I think are attractive, but like, I know if I were to date them, it would like there would not be some connection off that. So it's like, I don't really understand that mentality, and I've thought about saying something to her. Maybe I will next time we talk, because I'm just like, it's like if you can't come up with personality criteria, and I don't know, I mean, maybe this one guy she likes is a good guy, but it's like, if all you can say is he's hot, it's like, why do you think you're going to get with him and everything's just going to go great? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing to mention here is the young at heart thing. And as Stephen was pointing out with the statistics, even if you're young at heart and you're 40, and some other man is 40 and he's also young at heart, he has the ability to get somebody who's actually young and has a
Yeah.
literal physical young heart rather than being someone who's just young at heart or just
Yeah.
appears young. But regardless of that, it's still good to work out. I do like my home workouts and things like that. Getting middle, I'm past middle age. I'm in the middle age area. Steven's getting back in the gym, even though he's found someone. It's still something good to do. So
Yeah.
that aspect of it is still positive, even if you're completely single and things like that. And again, just as a reminder, are you looking for a partner? Are you looking for somebody who, if you are looking for somebody that wants to have kids, or just completely understand, like, if somebody wants to have kids, it's just going to make sense for them to go younger. This is just a biological
Yeah.
reality of life. Not even just, let's say they want to have a few kids, or just the amount of energy that you have spend time spending with those kids. And even just like personally, there's already the 5 year age gap, as we talked about. The person is just also thinking, if I'm going to partner with somebody, I want as many years as possible with this person. And I guess if you say you're the same age and you die at the same time, it's whatever. But there's just considerations where age is not just a number. Age is a number that signifies a reality of, pretty much reality, which is time. Like, actually, that I need to do an entire annoying sayings on age is just a number, because I think existence itself is defined by time, and age is the way we actually define what time is. So time, that age might be the most significant thing when it comes to existence that can possibly exist. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have much else. I was just going to resume here. All right. So this
Okay.
section is called Happy with Mr. Normal. When happily married women told me what they thought was important, as you get older, similar themes emerge. And this is in highlights. What matters is finding the perfect partner, not the perfect person. It's not about lowering your standards. It's about maturing and having reasonable expectations. There's a difference between what makes for a good boyfriend and what makes for a good husband. Over the years, stability and dependability outrank fireworks and witty banter. So Lori's college friend, who's 39 and has been married for 12 years, talks about the pressure that came from society in general and her social circle in terms of the kind of guy that she should be dating. I remember in graduate school, this female professor who was single and miserable. I heard I was dating Barry and commented on to a mutual friend, she could do better. I remember thinking that she had no clue, and that no one could hope for a smarter, nicer, more promising person. History has proven me right. Barry may not always dress the way I like or do Mr. Fix It jobs around the house instead of watching football, but he'll do anything for me. He makes me chicken soup from scratch when I get the flu. He makes it without salt to watch out for my blood pressure. In the end, that's love and a great marriage. Amanda said that the biggest misconceptions she had when she was single was that consistency equals boring and that compromise is a negative word. She hopes her daughter has her priorities straight when she starts dating one day. I couldn't have had married Barry or anyone else for that matter if I had nitpicked over the things I see single women rejecting guys for now. Elise, who had been married for 8 years and had two children, described her relationship with her husband this way. When I turned 35, I'd just been dumped by a guy with the qualities I thought I wanted, and I was devastated. A few months later, I met my now husband, who possessed only a few of those qualities. The sparks didn't fly immediately. Instead, he has other qualities I wanted: integrity, honesty, willingness to do the right thing, even if it was difficult, stability, and most important, love and understanding of me. The reason I hadn't met Mr. Right yet was because I was wrong about the qualities Mr. Right should have. Suzanne would agree. A 30-year-old marketing executive who lives in Austin told me how she married the guy who seemed like Mr. Right the first time, but now is married to the real Mr. Right. She laughs when she thinks about the mistakes she made in picking her first husband in almost a second. For me, zeroing in on non-negotiables while being able to forego the whipped cream was the real key. After passing up a third date with an interesting guy, because he wore sandals and had a cat, she told me I became enlightened, which basically meant I was willing to overlook the stupid stuff. And now here I am with the guy I want to grow old with. Of course, everyone out there dating knows that what Greenwald called it subjective traits are important. It's just that we place the same value on the objective and subjective ones, and it's hard to find a real live human being who has equal measures of both. If a guy has more subjective traits than objective traits, we rule him out. But if he has the objective traits, it's harder to rule him out because objective traits are easier to measure, and we assume the harder to see on the surface. Subjective ones, yeah, on the surface, subjective ones are there, but just aren't apparent. Obviously, this isn't always true. Lynn, who is 42, is now divorced, looks at things differently now. I had the handsome, square-jawed husband, she explained, but when he cheated on me for the third time, we got a divorce. I started to learn that the superficial does not matter in the long run. What matters is finding a person of substance. Unfortunately, some of us don't realize that until we've been there, done that category. Lynn told me that about two great guys in her office who had a really hard time dating. One of them was Brad, is stocky and balding, but she said when you get to know him, you find he is witty, honorable, hilarious, intelligent, downright adorable. A lot of women who didn't look past the bald head and less than perfect body. And it wasn't until last month when Brad turned 38 and got married. A man doesn't have to look like a Ken doll to be a keeper. My friend Brad sure is, and the girl who has kept him is a lucky woman. Lynn, another colleague, as another colleague, Mitch, who is 30 and is one of the nicest men Lynn has ever known. He's shy. Lynn said when you get to know him, he's a lot of fun to spend time with. He doesn't have a super trendy hairstyle. He's not a bad looking guy, just an average looking guy. He has so many great qualities, but it seems like women in this age group don't even look at him. It makes me sad. From my perspective at 42, I know that there are many younger guys out there who really want to find love, who want a commitment, who want to be married, who want kids, and they're often overlooked by women ages 25 to 35 who want to have it all. Okay. End of that section. Yep.
Yeah. Now here it's this. We're visual creatures, so there is going to be an aspect of the visual attractiveness. I do get that, and there's that saying that I think is not really that accurate, where it's like, oh, you're going to tell if you want to sleep with someone in the first 30 seconds that you meet them. I don't necessarily think that's an accurate assessment of things. It might fit for like the top 10% of people,
Yeah.
according to you, because some people will have different attractions. Like some people just like blondes, they just don't like brunettes, so they just like some really hot brunette might not appeal to them. Some people like different parts of body parts. Like with women, for some of them, there's just something intrinsic about a taller man. So there's some of those aspects, but I think that's more of a animalistic sort of just hormonal type of drive, and I don't think that doesn't necessarily define who humans are. We are kind of defined by other things outside of that. Like again, the time, it's perception. If we're just like, yeah, we're just going to rot here, like apes, the apes that we are, then yes, it's that immediate thing. But we are humans, and we think, okay, if I do this now, what will happen in the future, and all these things. And then there's the key part. If you are mainly attracted to somebody based off of their physicality themselves, chances are there's going to be many other people that are also just attracted based on their physicality. And if that person has actually decided to dedicate themselves or to be with you and have intercourse with you, and you know, consciously or subconsciously, that it's based off of their looks alone, that person also at least subconsciously knows you're not there because of their intellect. You're not there because of them actually being dedicated to you. You're there for their looks. So they'll also be open. They've already shown you that they are willing to hook up with somebody who's just into them for looks alone. Chances are they will also be willing to do that with somebody else that doesn't really value too much else about them. And on top of that, there might be somebody else out there that will value them not just for their looks, but for who they truly are inside, that they might form a stronger relationship with. So you might as well be that person who's actually latching on or attracted to them or with that person due to the underlying things versus just the visuals, because just the visuals is just something that can be accomplished by other people. And if you're leaving the main part that's of the iceberg that's underneath, somebody else will mine that part, and that person will be drawn to that person. So there's things to keep in mind.
Well, it's a similar thing with money. Like they talk about that too, how like certain guys will come into money and then all these women are interested in them. Then they complain about gold diggers, but it's like, were these women there because of things you have to offer? Or do they just think, oh, you're their shot at a luxury life? And then I thought about this in my own circumstance. Like, as I become better off, I don't mind spending money on my girlfriend because, like, I'm doing kind of well now, I'd like to say, but like, I'm not where I want to be. But if as I do better and better, I'm happier to spend money on her because she's been with me this time as I'm on my way up. So it's like, she's loyal to me in that return. And they say that's where you see a lot of those couples where there's like a rich guy and kind of an average or, plain looking woman, because she was with him before he became successful, but because she stayed loyal to him, because she was loyal to him when he was on his way up, he in turn stayed loyal to her and kept her around. Whereas if you see the trophy wives and whatever, those are usually women who just come out of the woodwork because they see a guy with money. And it's like, which do you want ultimately? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also if you're invested into those just surface level type of appearance things, as you mentioned, that also goes lower. So if you are attracted to appearance alone, then don't be surprised if the person that you're with is also attracted to appearance alone, and then find somebody who's of a different or better objective
Yeah.
appearance than you are in those categories. And I think but I like the honesty here, where this whole idea that all men are just into looks and all these things. Not quite.
No.
And also, don't act like women don't really also base a lot of the
Yeah.
things on looks. It's what we do.
And as you
Yeah.
say yourself, like, there's nothing wrong with preferences. Like, for example, I have a female friend who likes redheads, but it's like, for a fact a marriage is not gonna it's not a guy having red hair is not gonna make or break the marriage. Like, there's no case for that. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, you may think, oh, he's good looking, but it's like, and I thought about some of this stuff she's saying and how it relates to my own parents' marriage, like willingness to compromise, willingness to work out disagreements, willingness to agree to disagree in certain areas, like being very open and honest about things, like all these things that she's talking about. And I've thought about the successful marriages of my parents and also other people in my family, and how does some of that apply too? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a key thing also. Like,
So
one of the key things that people could look at, and this is unfortunate in certain communities and certain places and things like that, is check the relationships that they grew up with. Are their parents still together? Do they have siblings who are in relationships? And there's some. It's not 100%, but it's the data. It's a data point that I think has been lost in this new time of just choices and travel and options, where people are just, no, we're not even going to base it on past behavior or was it past pertinent experiences and behavior to the actual thing that you're looking for. Like, chances are, if their parents never actually had a strong relationship, then when would they have seen one? And okay, of course, if they haven't, then you understand, like, okay, now I'm going to ask for more. Because, like, there's some people who, if they've had a strong relationship, they've seen maybe their parents work through things, or if
yeah.
you're going through an issue with them and they're close to their parents, they'll talk to the parents, and the parents will support them. Even if you don't have that person, you can find somebody who has. So that's key there, because I think that sort of relationship, again, it also depends on what relationship are you looking for. If you're looking for something polyamorous, or if you just want to be two of you absconded to the woods and things like that, that's one thing. But if you want to be in a community with their friends and their relatives and things like that, it's good to know about these things ahead of time. And it seems a lot of the people don't really seem to care about any of that stuff and base it on very surface level things.
Yeah. All right. So there's one more section here, which I'll finish off. It's someone knocks some sense into me. So she says she knows that Rachel Greenwald was right. She needed to approach dating differently. But if I tried looking for those subjective qualities, I still had a problem. I wasn't meeting any men. So she decided to call a matchmaker. This seemed like a radical step. It never occurred to her because when she was younger, she always believed she'd meet the right man on her own. He'd be sitting next to her on an airplane, waiting in line or something else. It seemed ridiculous now, but I thought the odds of this happening. Um, but it seemed ridiculous now when I thought about the odds of this happening. After all, we don't subject other aspects of our lives to pure chance. When you want to get a job, you don't just hang out in the lobbies of office buildings hoping an employer will strike up a conversation with you. When you want to buy a house, you don't just walk aimlessly from neighborhood to neighborhood on your own hoping to spot a house that happens to be for sale, matches your taste, and contains the appropriate numbers of bathrooms and bedrooms. That's too random. If that's your only method of house hunting, you might end up homeless. So you might hire a real estate broker to show you potential homes that that meet your needs. By the same token, why not hire a matchmaker to show your potential partners? So the idea of looking across the room and locking eyes with a stranger still seemed more appealing. But in what room exactly? Where would I find this charming stranger? In my office, which consisted of me and only me. In my living room or kitchen, where I went when I wasn't in my office. At a bar, which wasn't exactly a mecca of quality men. Single women I know complain of the same problem. Where in the heck would a busy modern woman magically run into the one? Many single women have a schedule like this: wake up, commute to work, work all day, stop at the gym or your female book club, microwave your dinner, watch TV, reply to emails, and go to bed. And the weekends, have lunch with girlfriends, run all the errands you didn't have time for during the week, pay bills, open mail, walk out, spend another Saturday night at a party or trendy bar hoping to lock eyes with that handsome stranger. I'm not saying it can't happen. I've dated a few of those handsome strangers, but I never ended up marrying them. So I didn't want to leave things up to fate or destiny anymore. I wanted a matchmaker's help, but I didn't want her to completely dismiss. I didn't want her to dismiss my objective criteria completely. I just wanted someone to add perspective and common sense to my search in the way Greenwald was suggesting. I wanted someone who could say, you know, he may not seem like your type, but trust me on this one. I wanted her to remind me of what's important and help me break my pattern of ruling out good guys for all the wrong reasons. So I got on the phone and called up Wendy, a local matchmaker, and they arranged to have coffee. She gave the rundown of her dating casualties, the musician she lived with in her 20s, cute, smart, and creative. But the theory that opposite personalities attract and seemed to work for us after we moved in together. The lawyer who came next, cute, smart, funny, and successful, but he became so possessive that even my most open minded friends thought he was creepy. The brilliant entrepreneur, cute, funny, and successful, but maddeningly unreliable and egotistical. The TV writer who wasn't ready for a primetime relationship, cute, smart, funny, and creative, but not interested in committing to me. The charming investment banker picked me up at a party where I later learned he was supposed to be someone else's date. That should have been a red flag. The journalist who lived far away, cute, smart, funny, creative, and nicest guy on the planet, but we could never agree on where to live and the kind of family we wanted. The political consultant I seemed to share a lot of interest with and who seemed to be great most of the time, except he was being dishonest when he was being dishonest or went off his antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications. And then he was cute, smart, and funny, but had a Jekyll and Hyde personality. The sexy filmmaker for Match, cute, smart, funny, and successful, but not good dad material. All these guys were initially attractive on paper, but I clearly had a pattern of making the wrong choices. Did she think she could help? Wendy thought she could. In fact, she already had someone in mind. So that's the end of chapter 5. Yep.
Hmm. Yeah, you should check out the previous part 4, where she talks about some people and the actual dates and the actual dating thing. And yeah, it's pretty. It was the blind dates that it was at. It's
Yeah.
pretty sad. And
Yeah.
you don't even have to do this. Just go online. Just go on any dating website. If you're a guy, create a basic profile. Even you don't have to create your own profile. Just if you're a guy, pick any typical woman's profile, copy and paste the entire thing, get a random stock image of a woman, put it up, and just experience time on that dating app just as that person. If you're a guy, if you're a woman, do the same thing. Just copy and paste something you find from a random guy's profile, put a random man's picture, and just go on and try to like contact certain people depending on what app you're in, and just try to see how interaction is on these things, just for other points of view. Because I think just getting information is a positive thing. Now, when you talk about the apps themselves, like Steven's pointed out, the housing thing, this is something we've talked about before. I don't know if we talked about it in this series, but in just chat groups, things like we're talking about, Steven and I have talked about this before. Yes, you have thousands of people to actually look at. Yes, you have hundreds of people you can walk and meet in just the neighborhood areas if you're living in the city, but it's still the same you. If you have an actual need to actually get certain food, you're not just going to be like, oh, there's too many restaurants, or oh, I don't know what. If you know what you want to eat, you'll get it. Like the other day, just 2 days ago, I was like, okay, I want garlic nuts. I knew there wasn't any extra bakery. I guess maybe not. I haven't seen a bakery here in Nairobi where you can just get the garlic nuts. So instead, I just went online, looked at the 30 or different recipes for garlic nuts that were just there on the website. You pick up one. I could afford to go to the store, get the flour, get home, get the yeast, make the things, make the garlic nuts. You got the oven, you got the tools to do that because you know what you want and you can use those tools to get the things. And that's what these apps are sort of like. If you're just kind of going random and just flagging out in the dark, then yes, you're going to have a struggle. But I don't think you're going to struggle because of the dating apps.
No.
The dating apps are just another tool. It's easy. Is it? There's, like you said, what other field do people say because now there's apps for buying houses, picking banks, choosing a school, getting food. People don't say, oh, now there's so many more options of this, so it's bad, it's negative to do it. Yes, there might be some people who might scam you more. Yes, with email, like these people sending like Nigerian prince scams and things like that. But those people who are getting scammed by Nigerian scams would get scammed by somebody calling you on the phone or sending you a letter. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to, but I think many more people have been successful in business rather than people who've been scammed by using email. So I think about it that way. So it's get yourself to be a stronger, more solid point of view. When you're on these apps, also try to understand how the people you are actually get trying to be attracted to. This person you might be trying to contact, they might not be, they might the woman you're trying to contact is not necessarily not responding to you because they think you're a crap dude. Like you said, that the initial quote about the imagination, you send this person a message, they're not responding, they must hate me. So I'm going to lower my standards or lower my levels because this person, I'm not good enough to get with this person. But chances are, if that person is somebody you consider good, try copy and pasting their profile, put a woman's image, and see how many messages that person gets. Like your good message might be one of the 100 messages she gets that day under just like a whole bunch of filth, flaw, and filth. Talking
Yeah.
about Bill Cosby here, so that could distract it, but also on the other aspect of it, with the women out there, if you're thinking your experience on these dating sites is constant contact, and you're like, why aren't the good guys getting in touch with me? Go copy and paste a good guy's profile that you think is a good guy that you wish would contact you, and put your info up there and see how little actual contact and response that person gets from people. So there might be a chance that person is not contacting you because they've tried so many times. They've tried to contact so many other people that just don't respond to them.
Yeah.
So you can do that, and then you also will understand, you as that
Yeah.
woman, maybe you should reach out and actually reach out and touch someone in that kind of sense. So yeah, that's just
Yeah.
something thinking about these
I've
things.
had this debate with different female friends because I kind of see both sides of it. Because I explain like it's frustrating as a guy. I mean, I lucked out a lot with the lady I'm with now, but I was saying like I've had a lot of incidents where I've taken the time to read through all the profile, write out like a customized response and no
Yeah.
response, and then it's like it gets frustrating because you do that 100 times, you get like one or two responses back, and then from those responses, maybe a conversation, maybe a date, and then it's like you feel like you cast your set net so wide and you get almost nothing. But then on the other side, the women have made the point, like one of our friends made the point. She's like, I made a profile. I got like 500 messages when I tuned in, but it was just like, hey, or hey, what's up, or nice ass, or whatever. And then that's aggravating too, because then by the time you sift through all the messages, you get to like someone who actually read your profile and has a common interest or whatever, but then you're just tired of all the bullshit, you won't respond. So I think that's the challenge with some of these free things too. And some people have said the paid websites are better. Again, I lucked out with my lady through the bullshit Facebook app, but with the paid things, it's a little better because like there are people who are serious and actually want to be there and find someone. It's not just, oh, I'm going to cast a wide net and hope someone sleeps with me, if they respond.
That is a key thing. Yeah, if you are having some struggles, that's one thing. I think that whole thing of trying to relate to see that. But yeah, look into the paid ones where you pay a little more. And you're talking about like the fully paid ones where it's not like, oh, you can be on this and then you pay a little extra for a perk. Because I know like OkCupid has that thing where like you could just use it for free, but then you can pay for extra things. But there's some where it's like you have to pay even just to join, right?
Yeah, like Match.com. I think you need like 100 something to start. I don't know if it's monthly or what, but I think they try and eHarmony, some of those, they try to synchronize it a little more, like what are your interests, and they try to match like what are your interests, are the people around your age, like they try to tailor it a little more to, but
Yeah.
again, but that's why you're paying, because you're paying for those services. Yeah.
Because I know a few people who found the person that they currently married to past 30, and it was on social media. It was on, no, it's not on social media. It was on these dating websites. So it's not completely negative. It's not completely bad. But you can find them, or you can miss out. But that's the key thing. Who are you personally? Like, if you're the person, if a lot of these situations, see, she was saying I was picking these people and I wasn't really picking them in the right way. So there was something off. So getting someone else, if you're having issues, at least talk to some friends that are honest with you, or just a third party that you can bounce some ideas off of.
Yeah.
That different point of view on what's going on is very key. And you've got to be open to just hear criticism. Like if somebody says like everything's okay, if somebody tells you everything's okay and clearly you're not finding somebody, that's then that person is either lying to you or they're unable to see what the issue is. Outside of some places, like if you're living in like a small town of like 5,000 people and everybody's coupled up, yeah, you're going to understand
Well,
there's going to be some struggles there. But this book isn't really focusing on those kind of people.
some advice too that some of the manosphere guys have given, which is really good. They actually give it to, it applies both to women and men, is have people of the opposite sex who are related to you vet these people. Because the thing is, if you're a pretty woman and you're like, do you think this guy's all right? The guy will tell the woman whatever she wants to hear because he's trying to get with her. It's the same thing with like certain women will just tell the guy nice sounding things. But if you have like, if you date a certain woman and you ask like your mom, your sister, your aunt, whoever, they're going to be a little more objective because they're looking out for you and they're not trying to get with you. So they'll be honest, like, oh, this woman has some red flags. Maybe you should be careful. Or if you're a woman, ask your dad, your brother, whoever, like, hey, do you think he's good? Because then he'll say, you know, oh, I want my sister or daughter to do well, and this is a red flag. I'm going to say something. So it's like they can be a little more objective. Where if it's a friend will just tell you things you want to hear, or someone who is interested in you might also tell you things you want to hear. That's a challenge.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
that's of course also assuming that this person is a virtuous person. Like if you know this is kind of a toxic kind of individual who
Yeah.
hasn't really been that positive, hasn't had actually
Sure.
good, strong relationships in their life, then you can also use them to vet. Like if you ask it if this person is okay and they vouch for that person, chances are that person is not okay. Because if
Yeah.
somebody, those people who in those kind of breakup, kind of messed up kind of relationships can notice who's actually positive and good. They don't want you to bring somebody in your life that's actually going to model a positive, healthy relationship because it's going to highlight how negative and toxic your relationship with that person is. So you could, but just the whole idea where getting other people, even if it's at the end of the day, it's you and that person, and you're starting a new relationship, starting a new family by getting married and things like that kind of idea, that happens. But that family doesn't exist in a vacuum in very few cases. So it's good to have people in your workplace, people you value, people you also don't value, uh, to get the idea so you can see what other people are seeing from this. Because and you can also just get kind of the love bomb type of thing where you can get blinded by certain things, hormones and possibilities and options where you might not see certain things. So it's good to get other eyes on the case. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Trying to think of it. That was it for that chapter. I like that chapter a lot. Not really sure. Did you have any other thoughts or ideas? I mean, a lot of the other stuff that we sort of foreshadowed, they'll talk about later. So I don't want to
Okay.
just, yeah,
Yeah, that seems to happen. Like in the early when he starts talking about these are the early ones and like going on these random things, and she ends up actually talking about them in the
yeah,
chapter, and that's a positive thing. That's like I think part of why I find this to be a good series that we're going through. So this is part 5, as we mentioned.
mhm,
There's other parts already up, so y'all can check that out, and
yeah,
also really check out that other conversation we had about the book because that was more of an encapsulation of this, where I think a lot of those ladies who are talking about that who being talked about in that article would probably benefit from actually having read this book because it gives some points of view. And so we'll continue this one. There'll still be a few more parts in this one. And I think to finish it off, to conclude, we might go through the actual like goodreads.com and read some of the 1 star the 1 star reviews of this book
yeah,
because there's a salt mine there of just some people with just who I'm just like, did you read the book? Are you taking things entirely too personal? This is something that we've discussed
yeah,
when you talk about this topic. Some people say, oh, well, not all women are like that. Why are men talking about all these bad things? Why are people talking so badly about women? My personal experience was like this and this. Like, first of all, that whole not all thing, anybody says not all can go die in a fire. Second, people who take negative things said about a few people of something that you're familiar with and apply that to yourself, and you say this is not right to do this, first of all, they're not talking about you. If they're not talking about you, don't take umbrage with it. But do those same people also say when something positive is said about these other people that you just happen to be like, do they also say that's not fair because that's not who I am? I'm not showing those positive traits. So why are you praising these people for showing those positive traits? No, they only seem to take notice when it's something negative and they can implant themselves into this. But yeah, I think that's
Well,
a key thing here.
well, like as an aside, we were talking. I mean, there's that video will be up about the article, but like I was getting a little annoyed with one of my friends because she's a lesbian and a feminist, and she's like, I agree with the women here. I'm like, you're not a man. You don't date men. You don't. It's like you're just kind of living in your own theoretical lesbian feminist bubble where it's like, well, this is how men should act according to our ideology, but it's like you don't date men, you don't know what men want. And this friend is very reasonable. Like I push back and she handles it pretty well, but I'm just like it just comes across as like you're kind of living in your own world that doesn't deal with the reality. It's just you're coming up with this theoretical framework and this is how you want things to operate, but it doesn't factor in what do the other people want, what is biology, like, none of that. No.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it.
Yeah.
We'll have a lot more content. We have other things. We normally record twice a week, and by the time you listen to this, there's a lot already in the I think in the book. We're recording this when there's already things ready for me to post and publish and get up. So there's a lot of content, and wherever you listen to this, there's a bunch of content. There's also going to be links somewhere below here where you can get like a merchandise store. You can, of course, follow, subscribe wherever you listen to this to have more updates and stuff. And there's also links to Steven's social media where you can find other content that he has there. And there's just a bunch of stuff. So if you liked any of this, if you've enjoyed this, thank you all very much for actually listening. And guys, gals, and everything else in between, this is goodbye for me.
Bye bye. Thank you.